This next question comes to us from Carolina from Surrey, BC. Carolina says, understanding how to access equity without increasing debt. So it sounds like you have a property or properties, Carolina, and you want to access some of that equity without increasing the debt on that equity. It could be your primary residence or an income property. So I got to start by saying the most popular or common or path of least resistant method of accessing equity is through a debt play. So through a refinance. Essentially, you refinance the property and you get a check for that equity. You don't pay tax on that check because you're not selling a property, you're just refinancing. Often your payment will go up, so you got to make sure the rental income will cover that increased payment. But sometimes the payment will actually go down. Because if you're at year 18 of a 25-year amortization and you refinance, you go back to 25 years, now your payment's stretched out longer period, you could get a check and your payment actually goes down. So first thing to look at is what's happening to your payment on the debt play. But that's not your question. Your question, Michael, I don't want to do that. I don't want to increase the debt. I want to find another way to access this equity without having any sort of debt service or debt payments. And there is another way to do it. And it's not used a lot. It's not as straightforward, not as easy is not the right word I like to use, but it's not as clean and simple, but it's definitely possible, and we do have people in our community that do it, and it's an equity play. So any business can finance their business with two different methods, with debt or equity. With debt, you borrow, and with equity is ownership, or people put up their money. And often for business people, it's their money they put up, so they have equity in the business. But often you can have other people put in money, and they get equity in the business. So large corporations do this by selling shares. Those are equity plays or equities. So people can invest in the business. They can give money to the business. They get equity in the business. And that's a way that a large corporation can raise money without raising their debt ratios. So large businesses do this all the time, debt and equity. Small businesses do it, and certainly real estate businesses do it. So if you don't want to use debt, you can use equity. What does this look like? What do you mean by using equity? Well, essentially in the cleanest form, it's the simplest form, it's bringing on a joint venture partner. Having somebody buy into the property, giving them a percentage ownership, and they bring cash. They bring a cash infusion into the property or into the business. And we can call the business, in this case, one property is your business. They can bring equity, a cash infusion into the business. So I want to show you something. I want to show you the three funding streams, and this might help make it a little clearer for you. Now, these are the three funding streams that we use at Keyspire as a starting point in order to fund any sort of property that we're looking at. Okay, so I'm going to call it the three funding streams. Okay, so your first main funding stream is conventional financing. Okay. Conventional financing. So this would be like going to the bank and getting a mortgage. And this would be a home equity line of credit. This would be going to a major institution and going through the application process and getting what we call conventional financing, or I also call it institutional financing because you're going to an institution or a business to get your financing. So conventional financing is one of the three investing streams. Second investing stream is private lending. Private lending. So you're also getting a mortgage or some sort of lending on the property, but you're not going to a big institution. You're going to an individual private lender. For example, myself, I'm a private lender. I'm not a big bank, but I do lend out money and people pay me an interest rate for that money. So private lending is one of the three investing streams. So conventional financing or institutional financing, you go to a big company or a bank. Private lending is you go to an individual. And the third funding stream, the third way to get money for your real estate investment is private equity. Private equity. So it's very similar to private lending. You go to an individual, but instead of lending you the money, which means they're going to give you the money and you've got to pay an interest rate, and then you got to pay the money back, they're actually going to buy into the deal. They're going to give you a chunk of cash for a percentage of the deal and a percentage of profits, whatever you negotiate as far as the equity into the deal. So you got that private lending is they're going to lend you the money, you're going to pay interest rate back. Private equity is they're going to buy into the deal, get equity in the deal, and get some sort of profit share on the way out. And so these first two plays here, these first two funding streams are what we call debt. Okay, whether it's a bank or an individual, it's a debt play. You have debt on the property. The lender, you're the borrower, the lender doesn't actually own any part of the property. They just own a lien or a mortgage on the property, and you're paying them an interest rate. This one over here, this is an equity play, private equity. Okay, private equity, you can actually raise money with private equity without having any debt on the property, but you don't get something for nothing. You've got to give up equity in the property, which, I mean, it's okay. Would you rather have 50% of nothing or 50% of something or 100% of nothing? I'll say that again. Would you rather have 50% of something or 100% of nothing? So often it makes sense to give up 50% of the deal to actually fund the deal. Now this is more common when you're first going to buy a property. So the property is, say, $400,000. We need an $80,000 down payment. I'm going to find a money partner to bring the $80,000. That's my private equity partner. They're going to give me the $80,000. We're going to buy the property, and I'm going to do some other sort of value add. I'm going to either find the property or manage it or negotiate the deal or all three. I'm going to bring my team or bring something that's very valuable to the deal that this person with the $80,000 doesn't have. And they don't want to bother to spend the time to do it. It might take them years to figure it out. So we come together, we buy the property. That's a traditional private equity deal. Your question is, I already own the property. How do I access that equity? Well, it's the same kind of concept, but you already own the property. So say you own the property and it's worth $400,000. We use that number. The property is worth $400,000, and say you have $200,000 of equity. Okay, you're going to have some equity. So say you have $200,000 of equity. So that's how much you have in the property, and you want to access this $200,000. Well, you could go to the bank and you could get the $200,000 out in a mortgage. At say, I don't know, 3 to 5%. It all depends on your credit. So call it 3 to 5%. You go to a private lender, you can access that from maybe 7 to 10 or 7 to 11%, depending on the terms. Or you can get a private equity partner and you don't pay them an interest rate, but you give them a portion of the deal. So say they give you the $200,000 and they now own half of the property, right? Because $200,000 is half of $400,000. They are a 50% partner and they've bought in for the $200,000 of equity. That's how you can access the equity without putting more debt on the property, is getting through a private equity partner. Now, private equity partners in this sort of structure, there's got to be an incentive for them to put their $200,000 down, and they got to get a good ROI on their $200,000. So if you look at the 4 ways to win with real estate, what we do at Keyspire, we got to make sure that for their $200,000, they're getting at least a 15 to 20% or 30% return on their money. So 3 funding streams. 2 are debt, 1 is equity. To access the equity, you can either access it through debt, which really is the preferred method. You would rather use debt and pay an interest rate every single month as long as the tenant's cash flow, the tenant's rent covers the payment. Or if you really have to and you can't get qualified for some reason, you could bring a partner in for equity. You can take that $200,000 out and you give them half of the deal. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you found a new way that you can access equity in a property without using the debt play. Please comment below. Let me know if that was helpful. Let me know if you found another way that you can access the equity without using private equity or private lending, a debt or equity play. Let me know if you've used any of these. Very interesting, very excited. Hope this was helpful, and we will see you in future videos. Thanks.